The imperious leader will be with us shortly.
Battlestar Galactica wasn't built to make space look clean. It was built to make extinction feel unavoidable. Not with time to breathe, not with happy endings you could predict from the opening credits. This was Vipers launching on a 7-day production clock, a fleet held together by spare parts and creative accounting, and a show that got so big so fast that the network, the studio, and even George Lucas couldn't figure out what to do with it. Behind every helmet, every alarm, every desperate jump to lightspeed, there was a different kind of chaos. The kind that involved lawsuits, tragedy, presidential interruptions, and a one-season wonder that somehow left fingerprints on the US Air Force. By the time we hit Fact 16, you'll understand why this series was both decades ahead of its time and completely impossible to survive in the world that created it. This is where the fight for survival started, on screen and off. Let's go. Fact number 1. When Universal greenlit Saga of a Star World, they weren't making a TV episode. They were engineering a feature film that just happened to have a broadcast window attached. The pilot cost $7 million, the most expensive television production in history at that point, only a few million shy of what Star Wars itself had cost a year earlier. Suddenly, the studio was staring at a bill so catastrophic that normal TV economics couldn't justify it. So Universal did something desperate and brilliant. Months before American audiences ever saw Battlestar Galactica on ABC, the studio recut the pilot into a theatrical release and quietly dropped it in Canada and across Europe. It worked. The film pulled in over $40 million worldwide, turning a potential financial disaster into an unexpected international blockbuster before the show even premiered on television. But theatrical audiences saw a very different story. In that cut, Baltar gets executed immediately, written off as a one-scene traitor with no future. ABC needed an ongoing villain for the weekly series, so the TV version spared him, and that single edit reshaped the entire trajectory of the show and turned Baltar into one of science fiction television's most iconic antagonists. The pilot didn't just break budget records, it rewrote the playbook, proving a TV show could launch like a summer blockbuster years before prestige television had a name. Fact number 2. Battlestar Galactica was never supposed to be a show you watched every Sunday night. Glenn A. Larson originally pitched it as 3 standalone television movies, long, ambitious science fiction epics inspired by biblical mythology, ancient astronaut theories, and the enormous cultural appetite for space adventure that Star Wars had detonated in 1977. ABC approved the trilogy. Sets were built at cinematic scale, and Oscar-winning effects wizard John Dykstra signed on to deliver visuals that could compete with anything in theaters. Then the US premiere aired on September 17, 1978. Nearly 65 million people tuned into Saga of a Star World, obliterating ABC's internal projections. Executives didn't panic because the show failed. They panicked because it succeeded too hard. Suddenly, 3 movies weren't enough. ABC wanted a full weekly series, and they wanted it immediately. The problem was, the entire production infrastructure had been designed for slow, movie-style schedules, not a relentless 7-day television grind. Overnight, the cast and crew were thrown into a system that demanded blockbuster scale at breakneck speed. The transformation was chaotic, unfair, and borderline impossible, but it created the scrappy, overreaching energy that defined the original Battlestar Galactica, and the chaos didn't stop on set. It followed them straight into court. Fact number 3. From the moment Battlestar Galactica premiered, the comparisons were unavoidable. The dogfights looked familiar, the laser bolts glowed the same way, and many of the special effects crew had literally just finished working on Star Wars. Even Isaac Asimov joked that he'd need a lobotomy not to notice the similarities. In early 1979, 20th Century Fox sued Universal, claiming Battlestar Galactica copied 34 distinct elements from Star Wars. Everything from space battles to robot designs to the concept of survivors fleeing a destroyed homeworld. Universal fired back hard, arguing that science fiction tropes belong to the entire genre and that Star Wars itself borrowed liberally from decades of pulp adventure serials. The case bounced through federal courts for years. A judge tossed out most of Fox's claims, then an appeals court revived the strongest ones and ordered a full trial. That trial threatened to expose internal memos, production secrets, and the shared industrial light and magic crew that worked on both projects. Neither side wanted that fight to go public. Rather than risk a courtroom spectacle, the studio settled quietly in 1983. No money changed hands publicly, no legal precedent was established, and the lawsuit faded into rumor and footnotes. But the damage lingered in the public imagination. Battlestar Galactica became framed as the show that got sued by Star Wars, a shadow that followed it long after the single season ended. Fact number 4. In Christmas 1978, Mattel's Battlestar Galactica toy ships were everywhere, especially the versions with spring-loaded red missiles that kids loved firing across living rooms. But on Christmas morning in Georgia, that feature turned deadly. A 4-year-old boy put a Cylon Raider toy in his mouth, hit the firing button, and the missile shot straight into his throat. He fell into a coma and died 6 days later. A week after that, another boy inhaled a missile from a Colonial Viper toy. Surgeons had to open his chest to save him. That second near tragedy proved the first wasn't a freak accident. Mattel issued an emergency nationwide recall, one of the fastest in U.S. toy industry history, and quietly settled the wrongful death case. But the shockwave didn't stop there. The Consumer Product Safety Commission rewrote federal regulations. Stricter choking hazard warnings, new size restrictions, and outright bans on spring-loaded projectiles for young children. A toy designed to mimic space battles ended up reshaping America's product safety standards. And those rules are still protecting children today. Fact number 5. On the night Battlestar Galactica finally premiered, millions of viewers settled in expecting explosions, Cylons, and a full 3-hour science fiction epic. They got about 2 acts of it, and then the screen cut to black. ABC interrupted the broadcast for a live presidential announcement. Jimmy Carter stepped in front of cameras to reveal the Camp David Peace Accords, one of the most significant diplomatic breakthroughs of the decade. Viewers who thought their televisions had malfunctioned suddenly found themselves watching Middle East peace negotiations instead of Viper dogfights. Confusion hit network switchboards immediately. Some fans panicked, assuming they'd missed the ending forever. ABC had to rebroadcast the entire pilot just to calm the outrage. Meanwhile, overseas critics, especially in the Soviet Union, looked at the same show and saw something entirely different: a Cold War propaganda message wrapped in special effects. Soviet newspapers accused the Cylons of being thinly disguised stand-ins for American anxieties about the USSR. No one at Universal planned any of this, but from the moment it aired, Battlestar Galactica wasn't just entertainment. It had been pulled into global geopolitics before the fleet ever left the screen. Fact number 6. Behind the scenes, Battlestar Galactica was fighting a scheduling war before the Cylons even showed up. ABC placed the series directly opposite All in the Family, one of the biggest television juggernauts of the era. For a brand new effects-heavy science fiction show, it was a brutal matchup. Ratings swung wildly week to week, and the high production costs made every dip feel catastrophic. Creator Glenn Larson later claimed ABC never intended to let the show grow. He believed the network wanted the time slot cleared for their rising hit Mork and Mindy, and keeping Galactica pinned against a monster sitcom made cancellation easier to justify. Whether that was deliberate sabotage or simply bad strategic planning, fans agreed on one thing: the time slot strangled the show. Episodes kept getting more ambitious, but the audience never had a stable place to find them. Instead of becoming a flagship franchise, Battlestar Galactica became a cautionary tale, a series with the scope of a blockbuster trapped in a scheduling battle it could never win. Fact number 7. Battlestar Galactica hit television in 1978 with massive ambition and an even bigger fan base. People tuned in every week, the cast connected, and the universe felt wide enough to run for years. Then, ABC made a decision no one saw coming. They canceled the show after a single season. No grand finale, no warning, just gone. The reaction was immediate and furious. Fans wrote letters, staged protests, and flooded ABC headquarters with petitions. Newspapers ran angry editorials demanding answers. Universal suddenly realized the truth. Even if the network had walked away, the audience hadn't. So they looked for a way to bring it back. And their answer was Galactica 1980. At first, the plan was bold, a time travel adventure where the crew would leap through Earth's history, fighting Cylons across different eras. Scripts were drafted, sets were built, and a 3-part pilot was already filmed when ABC got nervous again. Time travel, they said, was too strange for Sunday night family viewing. Overnight, the entire show was rewritten into a gentler, earthbound series about 2 colonial officers guiding a group of children through contemporary America. The new version never had a chance. Reused special effects, abandoned mythology, and a confused identity sent viewers drifting away. After 10 episodes, the show was canceled for the second time. But the universe refused to disappear. Through the 80s and 90s, Battlestar lived on in comics, novels, model kits, and even theme park attractions. The fandom never went quiet, it just waited. Then in 2003, everything shifted. Ronald D. Moore pitched a full reinvention, grounded, dramatic, and centered on survival instead of nostalgia. The Sci-Fi Channel hesitated until audiences saw the miniseries, and the response was overwhelming. The reboot became one of the most celebrated television dramas of its era, winning awards and redefining modern science fiction. Not bad for a series that had been canceled twice. A show that disappeared in 1979 didn't just return, it returned as a masterpiece. Fact number 8. From the very first episode, Battlestar Galactica didn't just drop viewers into space. It dropped them into a culture that felt older, stranger, and completely separate from Earth. Instead of explaining the colonials, the show made you live inside their world. Characters spoke in their own measurements, barked countdowns in centons and microns, and toasted victories with rituals never translated for the audience. You either kept up or you learned as you went. Most science fiction of the era treated alien terminology like decorative garnish. Galactica treated it like the structural backbone of a real civilization. Even the Cylon Empire wasn't written as a faceless robot army. Behind the chrome armor were carefully outlined ranks, internal political hierarchies, and a looming imperious leader designed like a fusion of ancient priesthoods and totalitarian dictatorship. The show never paused to explain any of it, but the structure was there, shaping every confrontation. Writers even invented a form of network-safe profanity that accidentally became iconic. Frack started as a clever workaround to get raw emotion past ABC censors, but it spread so quickly through the scripts that it slipped into fan magazines and schoolyard slang within months. The design team followed the same philosophy. Colonial uniforms weren't Earth military knockoffs. They were built from layered cultural influences, naval traditions, religious iconography, bits of Egyptian imagery, giving the fleet a sense of ancient history that felt lived in rather than fabricated for television. Even background signage used a custom alphabet, hinting at a deeper language viewers rarely saw, but could always feel. For a 1978 network series, this level of world-building was unheard of. Most shows borrowed the Earth we knew and put it in space. Battlestar Galactica built a universe that felt ancient the moment you entered it, and that's why it stayed with people long after the first season faded. Fact number 9. In the earliest story drafts, the Cylons weren't robots at all. They were living reptilian aliens wearing chrome armor, part of a biological empire with actual warriors inside those metallic suits. The theatrical cut of the pilot even includes a blink-and-you'll-miss-it shot of a green creature visible under a Cylon helmet, a leftover from that original biological design. But network standards and practices saw a major problem. If the Cylons were organic beings, then every battle scene meant showing living creatures getting violently destroyed in primetime family viewing hours. For ABC's Sunday night slot, that was a line they absolutely would not cross. So almost at the last moment, the writers rewrote the entire enemy species. The Cylons stopped being lizard soldiers and became purely mechanical beings, emotionless, relentless, and morally safe to obliterate, week after week, without ethical complications. That one standards decision reshaped the entire tone of the series and every version that followed. The modern reboot's central mythology, Cylons questioning identity and faith and evolution, only exists because the 1978 show wasn't allowed to kill living aliens on broadcast television. A quick fix for network censors ended up defining 4 decades of Battlestar Galactica storytelling. Fact number 10. The original Cylon costumes were visually stunning, but nearly impossible to film properly. The chrome plating reflected everything in the studio: lights, boom microphones, camera operators, even crew members standing 10 feet away. Any standard bright television setup turned the suit into a walking mirror ball. So the production team shifted to darker sound stages and tighter controlled lighting, just to keep their own equipment out of the reflected shot. Those technical limitations accidentally shaped the Cylon visual identity. Instead of appearing as bright, clean robot villains, they became figures emerging from deep shadow, with only that sweeping red scanner light cutting through the darkness. What began as a practical workaround turned into one of the show's most memorable and menacing visual signatures. After the series ended, the design took on a cultural life of its own. Cylons started appearing anywhere science fiction was being parodied: Futurama, Family Guy, The Simpsons. One of the most famous sight gags appears in the A-Team's opening credits, where Dirk Benedict turns and looks stunned as a Cylon casually strolls past him on the Universal Studios backlot. A costume built around a lighting problem accidentally became one of television's most instantly recognizable silhouettes. Fact number 11. Throughout the series, characters casually referenced other Battlestars: Columbia, Rykon, Pacifica, Triton, entire warships with their own crews and operational histories. Yet audiences never saw a single one of them. The production only had budget for one detailed hero model, which meant every other Battlestar existed only in spoken dialogue. Instead of feeling cheap, it created narrative mystery. Fans imagined the wider colonial fleet, wondered what those ships looked like, and speculated endlessly about their unknown fates. The opening Cylon surprise attack never answered those questions, but the hints were enough to spark decades of expanded universe storytelling. From comic book arcs to licensed novels, Galactica became iconic partly because it stood completely alone on screen. Not just the flagship, but the last surviving capital ship viewers ever actually laid eyes on. Fact number 12. Muffit wasn't animatronic, mechanical, or remote-controlled. She was a living performer, a trained chimpanzee named Evolution, called Eve by the crew, wearing a padded dog-like costume custom-built just for her. Inside the suit, she could barely see and could only move in short, uncertain steps. The studio heat made her restless, and she frequently drifted off her blocking marks or wandered into stage lights just to look around. But that unpredictability worked heavily in the show's favor. Eve's natural organic movements gave Muffit a warmth and believable personality no robot prop could have delivered in 1978. The crew learned to film around her natural rhythms, waiting patiently for the small, genuine moments they could shape into usable scenes. The final result remains one of the strangest behind-the-scenes creative choices in science fiction television history. A robotic companion pet brought to life by a primate who never once behaved like a machine. And that's exactly why audiences remember her. Fact number 13. Patrick Macnee didn't just appear on Battlestar Galactica. He haunted it from two completely different directions. On screen, he played Count Iblis, with calm, almost seductive menace, the kind of dangerous charm that felt simultaneously comforting and threatening. His glowing eyes and careful, controlled stillness made the character feel like a fallen angel hiding behind polite, aristocratic smiles. But when viewers heard the deep, echoing voice of the imperious leader, the supreme Cylon commander, they were hearing Macnee again. Through heavy audio processing and layered vocal effects, he created a presence that felt ancient, mechanical, and utterly inhuman. A perfect, terrifying contrast to the smooth, charming menace of Iblis. The show never explicitly claimed the two characters were narratively connected, but fans kept wondering and theorizing. One actor performing both roles added a quiet, unsettling thread linking the series' most mysterious villains together. Macnee didn't just play two separate parts, he shaped the entire personality of Battlestar's concept of evil, both human and machine. Fact number 14. Fred Astaire didn't come to Battlestar Galactica seeking prestige or a late-career dramatic showcase. He came because his grandchildren loved the show, and he wanted to surprise them with an appearance. What the producers initially expected was a simple one-scene cameo, a friendly, nostalgic nod from a Hollywood legend. Instead, they built an entire standalone episode around him. The Man with 9 Lives gave Astaire the role of Chameleon, a wandering con artist and charmer who claims to be Starbuck's missing father. Astaire played the part with genuine warmth and emotional honesty, grounding a series known primarily for space explosions in something far more human and vulnerable. Audiences tuned in expecting a novelty stunt appearance. What they received was one of the most heartfelt and emotionally resonant episodes of the entire original run, carried entirely by an actor who didn't need laser effects or alien prosthetics to completely hold the screen. A small personal request made for his grandkids became one of Battlestar's most memorable and touching story beats. Fact number 15. When Glenn A. Larson moved from Battlestar Galactica to creating Knight Rider, he took far more than abstract creative ideas with him. He literally carried over the show's visual design language, starting with the Cylon's sweeping red scanner eye. That exact same scanning light effect became KITT's signature feature, a science fiction heartbeat borrowed directly from Galactica's practical design workshop. The audio team followed the same creative path. The distinctive whoosh sound of Viper launches was stretched and digitally reshaped to become part of KITT's turbo boost acceleration, giving the Trans Am a subtle auditory echo of spaceflight every single time it hit full power. Even deliberate crossover jokes slipped through production. In the Knight Rider episode Halloween Night, a costumed villain briefly walks on screen wearing a full, accurate Cylon helmet and armor, a quick visual wink for anyone who remembered Larson's earlier science fiction universe. Knight Rider wasn't positioned as a sequel, but Battlestar Galactica lived inside it regardless, embedded in the signature lights, the sound effects library, and the small moments where two shows from completely different genres quietly shared the same creative DNA. Fact number 16. Before home video game consoles became common household technology, handheld electronic games represented the absolute cutting edge of portable interactive entertainment, and Mattel wanted Battlestar Galactica leading that charge. Their pocket-sized game let kids pilot a Colonial Viper using nothing more than blinking red LED lights, each tiny glowing dot representing an incoming Cylon raider that had to be intercepted and destroyed. The timing was aggressively strategic. Mattel rushed the handheld unit to retail stores alongside the show's September premiere, making it one of the very first official pieces of Battlestar merchandise available for purchase. Priced at $19.95, it became one of the best-selling licensed electronic games of 1978, outselling even comparable Star Wars handhelds during the critical holiday shopping season. For younger fans, those simple beeps and blinking light patterns genuinely felt like the future. their first real chance to pilot a Viper outside the passive experience of watching television. Today, working original units are highly prized collectibles, physical reminders of an era when a handful of blinking lights could successfully recreate the visceral rush of a deep space dogfight. Battlestar Galactica was never just a one-season science fiction show that came and went. It was an impossible project held together by raw creative ambition, relentless production pressure, and a crew desperately trying to build something bigger than television networks usually allowed to exist. Some ideas collapsed under the weight, others barely survived, and a few didn't receive the recognition they deserved until decades after cancellation. But that's precisely why the story still resonates. Even with the recycled visual effects shots, the wild last-minute script rewrites, and the brutal network scheduling battles, you can still feel the creative heart beating behind every frame. Real people trying to construct an entire functioning universe from absolute scratch, and hoping desperately that someone out there in the audience was paying attention and cared enough to remember. If you grew up watching it, you remember that spark, that rare feeling of discovering a fictional world so much bigger and stranger than broadcast television had any logical right to contain. And if you're discovering it now for the first time, you can see instantly why it never truly disappeared from cultural memory, why it keeps coming back, why it refuses to fade. So tell us in the comments which lost or canceled universe you want us to explore next. And subscribe right now so you don't miss the next signal drifting in from the forgotten corners of television history. Because some universes don't just fade away into static. They wait patiently in the dark for exactly the right moment to return.